welcome, Immigrant Nation. Another week, another new episode. This is your host, Aaron Deliosa, and this is An Immigrant's Life. An Immigrant's Life podcast on all the social media where you can follow us or reach us. If you or someone you know wants to come on the podcast, you can send us a message there or you can send us an email to our email address at animmigrantslife@yahoo.com. Ooh, it's been a long, beautiful weekend here in Canada. An amazing long weekend. I think this our long weekend. Oh, we have one more in October, Thanksgiving, which is one of my favorite. It's a great long weekend. I did some cycling with my buddy, with my friend. I haven't cycled with him in a long while, but it was amazing to cycle again with him. We did some house chores as always, the honey-do list, or honey to-do list? Yeah, honey to-do list. And spending time with family. I love extra day, I wish we have that extra day all the time. But yeah. Anyways, how about let's talk about this week's episode. In this episode, we are featuring an inspiring co-founder who's transforming the restaurant scene by celebrating immigrants through cuisine. Discover the vision behind the restaurant, which not only offers delicious dishes, but also supports immigrant communities and highlights America's rich immigrant history. Our guest will share her journey, the impactful projects they've initiated, and the crucial role immigration plays in economic growth. Tune in to learn how this innovative restaurateur is making a difference and the valuable lessons gained from working with a diverse team. Don't miss this deep dive into the intersection of food, culture, and community impact. It might be short and very sweet, but I'm pretty sure you're gonna enjoy it. So, without further ado, let's get into the show. Isa, dalawa, tatlo. Today's guest is the co-founder and COO of Immigrant Food. She doesn't just serve amazing dishes, she also delivers a mean serve on the tennis court. Everyone, please welcome Téa Ivanovic.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on, Téa. I know you're a busy lady. Why don't you tell the Immigrant Nation where they can reach you or if you want to promote anything?
Absolutely. So as you very kindly introduced me, I own Immigrant Food. We have 4 restaurants in the DMV, 3 restaurants in DC, and we just opened a 4th restaurant in Boston, Virginia. So I would love for all your listeners to come check us out. We're serving lunch, brunch, dinner, and happy hour.
Wow, that's amazing. 4 restaurants.
That's right. Yes,
Jeez,
4,
that's a
just the
lot.
4th one just in July. So we're busy.
Wow. With the pandemic and even just the nature of the business, keeping a successful restaurant is such a challenge. What's your secret of success?
Oh, well, it's kind to assume the success, but I think no, it's been very difficult. We opened a restaurant, our first restaurant right next to the White House, which was very intentional. A restaurant called Immigrant Food next to a White House that at the time in 2019, believed that immigrants are rapists and, all the horrible things that were said about us. So we wanted to open a restaurant right there next to the seat of power. And we did. We were very lucky to find a spot that is literally half a block from the White House. And we opened it in November 2019. We opened to a lot of press. We opened to, a lot of people wanting to check us out. And then 3 months later, the pandemic hit. So it was sort of very difficult. Starting a restaurant is hard enough, but I think starting and really building a restaurant during the pandemic was in a very downtown location was very difficult. So I think the challenge was really, getting through that. And I think on the bright side, I would say that I learned a lot about my business because I had to become my partner, my co-founder we had to become the dishwashers, the servers, the delivery drivers. the whole thing really from, in 3 months in. And I think looking back now, I think it allowed us to really understand every part of the business. And I think as a business owner, a lot of business owners will agree that it's very important. You may not be the best at every part of the job. I'm certainly not the best bartender. My bartenders are much better, but I know what they go through on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's if there is a secret, I think that's certainly one of the secrets.
Yeah, gives you compassion.
Compassion, understanding, and just really being able to, understand what they go through, but also know how to structure certain things, whether it's their hours that they work or what they should focus on, et cetera, et cetera. And as you grow, of course, you add more people to the team that, know these things very well. But I think just really having a pulse on your business every day is very important.
How do you get involved with the immigrant food?
So I was born in Belgium. My family's from the former Yugoslavia. I moved to the US on a tennis scholarship. I played varsity tennis at Virginia Tech. And then after that, I went to graduate school at SAIS, Johns Hopkins, for international affairs and economics, which was 1 year in Italy and then 1 year in DC. And that's how I ended up staying in DC. I worked not in the hospitality industry. I worked in public relations. I worked at a think tank, and I was a journalist. And I met my co-founder, Peter Schechter, at an alumni event. We both went to the same graduate school. And we started chatting about this idea. He had this idea of having a restaurant with a social mission. I worked with a lot of impact investors in my time at the PR firm that I worked at. And so this idea of having a business with this social mission from the very beginning and doing it in a creative way, right? Because I think a lot of the businesses I worked with before, would donate part of their profits to a cause. And while I think that's wonderful, we really wanted to integrate the cause into the business model in a more creative way, I would say. And so thinking through that was fascinating. And then on a personal note, I'm an immigrant, as I mentioned, and I'm very proud to be an immigrant. And this was at a time when the word immigrant became sort of a bad word by a very loud but small minority that were trying to make it so. And so I wanted to do my part in fighting against that.
When you hire your workers, do they have to be immigrants?
They don't have to be. I think, 99% of our staff are immigrants, whether newly arrived immigrants, first generation immigrants. But in most restaurants, that's the case. So most restaurants have an immigrant workforce, and the food chain as a whole. I mean, if you look at where the food is grown and packaged and processed and delivered and prepared, it's every step of the way is done by a majority of immigrant workforce. So in that sense, we're not that different. So, but we have great people from all walks of life and all places.
Speaking of food and the menu, what kind of food do you guys serve? Because immigrant food is it could be anyone.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we serve. So our food is the idea of immigrant food is that we celebrate immigrants through food. And so we really try to highlight the amazing diversity of recipes and spices and ingredients that immigrants have brought to this country for centuries. So our food is exactly that, which is, we take certain recipes or certain dishes that and love and then combine it with flavors that work really well, but are from a completely different part of the world. So we try to really be very creative and very intentional about how we serve food. And so the idea was to celebrate through food, but also advocate and educate on behalf of immigrants of yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Do you guys stick with the traditional recipe, or do you guys put some flair?
No, we definitely put some flair, and I think that's when you look at how if you look at certain things, like think of pizza, for example, right? I mean, pizza is from Italy, of course, but tomatoes are not. Tomatoes are from Latin America, and pizza wouldn't exist without tomatoes. And so it happened during the Columbian Exchange, where European traders went to South America, brought back tomatoes, and then created something completely different that they didn't know about. And that's what happened when Italian immigrants came to America, to the US. They brought pizza, but pizza here, everyone would agree that is very different from pizza in Italy. So you have, New York style, Chicago style, Detroit style, you have different kinds. And so I think that's what food is, the original immigrant, and food transforms and morphs into something different. And I think that's the beauty of food and of immigration, is that it changes and becomes something different, and there's something for everyone.
Does this restaurant reach out to create like community projects or anything like that?
Absolutely. And that's the sort of the two other parts or pillars of what we do, right? I mentioned the celebrating through food, but then the advocating and educating. And we wanted to have a restaurant that celebrates, but also advocates and educates. And that's incredibly important for us. So the way we do that is we partner with local immigrant service NGOs. We have 5 incredible impact partners that we work with that they're the heroes. They're the ones in the trenches every day, providing legal and housing and social services to immigrants. And so we highlight them through things like, we have an engagement menu. So of course, as a restaurant, we have a food menu and a drinks menu. And then we have this thing we created called an engagement menu, with 5 ways that you as a guest can engage with the community. It's sent out via social media, via our newsletter, and on our website as well, and aside from being in the restaurants. And so tens of thousands of people see it every week and engage with it. And it's 5 ways that are different. Every Sunday it changes. It's a volunteering opportunity, a donation opportunity, something to read or listen to, and then an event to attend. And so there's something, if you don't have time to volunteer, but maybe you want to listen to a podcast like this one on immigration or on something else. But it's sort of really ways that people can become connected with their immigrant community. And then the last part is the education piece. And we, as you know very well, there's a lot of misinformation out there on a lot of things. But immigration is certainly one of them. And so as a former journalist as well, I wanted to bring something where we can educate people on immigration. So we take one issue in immigration every single month, whether it's immigration courts or sanctuary cities or dreamers, like all things you hear about in the news, but you may not know a lot about if you're not in that space. So we try to tell those stories and share those facts, very easily accessible on social media, little videos, little infographics that people can learn more about these issues as they're like scrolling through Instagram at night.
100%. By the way, shout out to whoever runs your Instagram account for giving my podcast a shout out on your page. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. That's very, very sweet. It's we have a great team, and Beth and Eugenia, who are running it, are incredible. So I really appreciate the shout out.
No problem. Say hi to Beth then. I appreciate
We
it
will,
so much.
We will.
You mentioned you're from Belgium. Your family's from Yugoslavia?
That's right. Both my parents are from the former Yugoslavia, and they moved to Belgium before I was born. My dad is a volleyball coach, and so he was, finding different, job opportunities in Belgium, and so they moved there. And then I was born very shortly after their arrival. So I grew up, and that's one of the things I share when I talk about my immigrant experiences. Even though I was born in Belgium and I may look pretty Belgian, and I speak the language, I speak Dutch fluently, and I grew up there, went to school there. When people would see my last name, which is very, it's Serbian, I would immediately be looked at as a foreigner. And that's just the case in many, many countries around the world, and certainly in Europe. And when I moved to the US, I was 16 when I came to college. I was immediately accepted. You can be American if you believe in the values and you want to be American, you can be American. America has a lot of different issues and problems, but that's one of the beautiful things, is that we are an immigrant nation and you can be from anywhere and it doesn't matter. And I think that's wonderful. And that's something that certainly I want to have a small part in trying to preserve.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Europeans are more accepting of immigrants or Americans?
I think America is the immigrant nation, right? If you just look at our national symbols, the Statue of Liberty, right? If you go get a postcard in the post office and you don't want the flowers or the animals, whatever, you get a postcard, you get a little stamp that is of the Statue of Liberty. And that's one of our national symbols in this country. And that is the symbol of immigrants. and Ellis Island. I mean, those are sort of the things that we grew up learning about in this country for sure. So I think it's just incredible, the history of that, and I think that's something we need to preserve in this country.
100%. Being a quote unquote white immigrant, do you think you get off easier compared to the immigrants that are people of color?
I mean, I think it's a very, obviously complex discussion when it comes to, I think, to your question about comparing it to Europe. I think race is certainly a much more complex issue in this country and a much, difficult history here compared to Europe. I mean, of course, Europe and certainly Belgium have difficult history with colonialism as well in a different way. So I think that's always a difficult discussion when you talk to people about, where are you from? And, in America, more than in any other place around the world, you're either, I mean, whether you're first generation or a 10th generation, your ancestors are from somewhere. And I think here, obviously there's a huge part of the population that was brought here against their will, right, through slavery. So I think that adds to the complexity of the conversation around immigration. But at the end of the day, immigrants, whether you came here willingly or unwillingly, and that's also a whole discussion because a lot of people flee their country and they come here, even though, they may not want to leave their country, but they had to leave their country because of persecution and certain other things. So, but I think no matter what, they bring a diversity and a culture and food that makes this country richer for it.
Food is the most important part. And that's what I don't understand with people that doesn't like immigrants, yet they're eating Chinese food or
Exactly.
pizza. Like, dude, where do you think that came from?
Exactly. And that's part of the, conversation we want to have is like, you like this food, and it's all like what I was saying before. It's food is the original immigrant. Food transforms. If Chinese food here is not the same Chinese food that you eat in China, right? Like it's not going to be the same because you don't have access to the same ingredients and the same crops that you have back home. But that creates something new and different. And in a way, it's delicious as well. It doesn't have to be the original way that your grandma made it for it to be still delicious. So I think that's the part of it that is beautiful around food and about how food changes and transforms as you move around the globe.
With Immigrant Food, what kind of projects are you guys pushing and creating to amplify the immigrant voice and the immigrant story?
So, I mean, we have sort of some of the activations I mentioned. Every week, we share ways that people can get engaged. We share a monthly magazine that people can learn about these issues. And then we also host a lot of events. So whether they're very serious panel discussions on human trafficking or asylum, or they're fun events. I mean, just, in August, we had our annual immigrant comedy night. So we do, 5 amazing comedians that are immigrants but are local and talk sort of in a very funny way about their experiences. And so we try to make it really lighthearted, but at the same time have space for very difficult conversations. And I think that's what you do around the table, right? Around food is when you have conversations with your family and friends around important topics. And food is the best non-threatening vehicle to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're full and you're sharing the food, most likely you're not going to get mad.
Right. You're breaking bread with someone. And I think that is a wonderful, wonderful thing that you can do with someone and a symbol of creating bridges between people.
Mm-hmm. What do you think you should be done to make America recognize that immigration is crucial for economic growth?
America's always recognized that immigrants are crucial to economic growth, which is why it has done so over centuries and welcomed immigrants over centuries. And just earlier, I had a conversation with one of the co-founders of Welcome.us, which is a great organization that works with rural communities that are needing immigrants for their economic growth, and they need it for their economic revival. And these Americans are so welcoming and exciting to bring in refugees and immigrants into their communities and have them become part of their economy. So I think if you look I think the confusion is the sort of national conversation is very polarized, and if you turn on TV, it's all horrible things about immigration. But then if you go to local communities, if you speak with people on the ground, they're actually very welcoming. And I think that's the conversation we need to have, is like, how can we showcase what is actually happening on the ground?
Can someone volunteer to Immigrant Food, or you just hire people?
So we hire people for positions in the restaurant, but we connect people to our partner organizations or impact partners to volunteer with them, because they are the immigrant service NGOs that are working in the social and housing and legal services. And so we part of what we do is we showcase what opportunities there are for people to get engaged.
That's beautiful, because most immigrants, they come in America or Canada, and they don't know where to go.
Exactly. I think that's a big challenge when you come to a new place. You don't know what your resources are, and so part of what we feel like we want to do is sort of have a platform for those voices and for people to learn about how can they get engaged and how can they actually make an impact themselves.
I saw one of the posts on the Immigrant Food Instagram account that someone can own a part of the Immigrant Food restaurant.
So we did a crowdfunding campaign for our growth. It closed on August 12th, but it actually allowed people to own a part of it. Was an equity crowdfunding campaign, so they could own shares in the company and be part of our growth.
That's beautiful. Are you guys gonna continue that, or?
So that round closed. The way we capital raise for our growth has been through friends and family. So people who want to put in money into the restaurant own equity portions of the restaurant, and then we can continue to grow. Crowdfunding is a different way of doing it, because we wanted to allow people to own some shares of the restaurant with $500 minimum. So that was really also great for our staff, because our staff was able to become an owner of a restaurant with, and have that opportunity, which often in the restaurant world is not possible. So that was a great thing we did this year, and I'm very proud to say that a lot of our staff are now part owners.
That's awesome. It's like when I saw that, it reminded me of the Green Bay Packers. You can own part of it, kind of deal.
Right. Right. I think it's great.
How has working with immigrants changed your perspective on the issue?
I think I've learned a lot more than I knew, right? And I think that's part of why I really love what we do with Think Table, is that we can educate people on these issues that are so close to you. I mean, you think of immigrants, you think of like the southern border, right? Like you think of detention centers and you think of, yeah, that happens in Texas. I mean, there's a detention center in Virginia. I mean, there's people, they're undocumented that work with you or around you, or, people who are dreamers that are your colleagues and classmates. So I think immigration and immigrants are much closer to all of us than we may realize. And, when you hear DC is a sanctuary city, you're like, well, what does that really mean? And so that's part of the things that we try to do with the Think Table. And I personally have learned a lot through it myself and through doing the research.
How do you stay motivated in the face of challenges related to immigrant advocacy?
I would say the on the ground stories. And I think that's what really motivates me, whether it's on the business side of, how do you keep going when you keep working, 80-hour weeks and you're tired and you're hitting a wall. I think it's actually talking to, people in the restaurant that come and enjoy the food. And I think it's the same on the immigration side, is how do you stay motivated when you listen to these, small minority of politicians talking about, immigrants are rapists and are like coming from mental institutions. You're actually, you talk to people on the ground, you talk to immigrants, you talk to the welcomers that are excited for immigrants and refugees to become part of their community. So I think it's just countering it with positive and real things on the ground that are happening, rather than getting swamped up in like sort of this crazy rhetoric.
100%. How can individuals or communities get involved in supporting Immigrant Food?
So I would say come to the restaurants. We have 4 locations right now, 3 in Washington, D.C., 1 in Boston, Virginia. One is right next to the White House. That was the original location. So it's on 17th and Pennsylvania. You can't miss it if you go to the mall. One is in Union Market. It's inside the market, so always a fun weekend activity. One is in Planet Word, which is on 13th and K Street. The Planet Word Museum is awesome. Whether you have kids or you're an adult, it's awesome about the history of language and how language has morphed and changed. And then our fourth restaurant, which opened this summer in Ballston, Virginia, right next to the metro. So come check us out there, lunch, brunch, dinner, happy hour, or get engaged with us on social media. It's at Immigrant Food on all the social channels. And, get to know us, learn a little bit more through the Think Table, get engaged through the engagement menus. There's lots of ways that you can become part of our orbit.
Beautiful. I know, Téa, you're going to bounce. I just want to say thank you for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation.
For sure. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much. You too. Bye-bye.
Again, Téa, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, listeners, for listening. This is Aaron Del Yosa from Immigrants Life. I will see you guys later.